Many people think they know what cybersecurity is, but they probably don't. Can you set the record straight?
Well, I'll try to. Um, it's interesting when I talk to people about what I do and I talk about cybersecurity. In most cases, I get the blank look, right? The deer in the headlight, because while I understand what it is and you understand what it is, they struggle with that idea. And then I break it down to the most fundamental, which is the bad guys want our data and they're doing everything they can to get to it. And so the practice of cybersecurity is protecting all of those assets that we use and we put into place to protect what's most important. In banking, it's financial records. In healthcare, it's HIPAA records, right? In the government, it's classified programs, right? There's lots of things that are um, the crown jewels for our customers, but they don't understand that what we do is we're monitoring and managing technology as a practice of preventing the disclosure of that data. So, I guess in a summary, cybersecurity is a practice whereby we're utilizing the best products we can with the best trained people that we can find, and putting processes in place so that we can make it repeatable. Um,
Yeah, that's
security security is not a magic. There's nothing magic about it. It's a methodical process and procedure.
that's interesting. You use two action verbs, monitoring and what was the other one?
Was it managing?
Managing. That's right. Those are not products. I think a lot of businesses and business leaders and owners assume they can buy a product and now they're, you know, abiding by cybersecurity rules and standards.
Agree. I talked to a longtime IT practitioner the other day, and I asked him, what are you doing for security? And he's like, well, we're really secure. We've got a firewall and we've got antivirus and we do content filtering. And I said, what else? He says, well, that's enough. And I said, well, if that were enough, why do we still have breaches? Right? Why are customers or and companies still getting compromised by bad guys who are after the data? So my argument is back to what you started with. It's still a process. It's still a practice, and we have to be better at practicing.
Is there a standard for cybersecurity, David?
There's been a lot of standards bodies who've tried. There's a couple out there that are pretty good to help give guidance. There's the NIST framework, which um, is one of the best, I think, in terms of categorizing risk and putting a program in place. There are standards around the technology and how you deploy it, and then there's standards around what's expected from the people who are practicing that security program. So there are some. I don't know that we've hit the maturity level we want yet, but we're getting better. In the 90s was we built perimeters, right, around what we want to protect. We used the whole build a building, put doors on it, put locks on it, put cameras, put guards. We did that around cybersecurity. And what we found is we had to open doors to allow the data to get used, right? So we open a door, which allows the bad guy to come in, and that's not what we wanted. So we put new controls, and so we had a perimeter within a perimeter within a perimeter, and the bad guys were still getting in. And so what we are moving to is security as close to that crown jewel as we can get it. But I think the other thing to note is security is not a one tool solution, right? It's not even a tool solution, it's a business problem, right? Um, and you have to think through, what am I trying to protect? Do I have the right tools in place? Do those tools talk to each other? How do I respond to the output of those tools? Because frankly, there's so much data, there's so much alert and event data that if I'm not looking for the right things, I'm going to miss it, right? So again, security is a practice. It has to be something that you build a discipline around.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's a business problem. So, would cybersecurity then cover what I consider the unpredictable factor? which are users? Because it's not like you said, it's not just products, but it's a
No.
process.
So, I heard one of my colleagues say that if we didn't have users, we wouldn't need security. And
Hmm.
while I'm not quite ready to go that far, I do think that users are a contributing factor to insecure programs, right?
Mm,
And we
that's
as
interesting.
practitioners have to be better at educating our users, helping them understand that clicking on this link doesn't make sense because it looks funny. Or I wasn't expecting an email from Susanna that had a big attachment, right? Or I found this USB device by my computer. I wonder what's on it, right? We have to be better than that. And so while I do think that uninformed users are part of the problem, the other half of that coin is the informed users who are trying to take advantage of weaknesses in our program.
Hmm. So, how do you implement cybersecurity? Which is like the $1,000,000 question.
Well, I think A, it has to start at the top, right? You have to work in an organization that knows they need it, right? And they need to understand that what they've done up to this point is not enough. It has to have the buy in at the executive level, right? And then you have to build a framework that is repeatable. So if you think about security, we call it the onion, right? The onion has multiple layers. And so I've got different tools at different layers, but I'm building what we call defense in depth, right? So if I've got defense in depth, I've got tools that I might miss it over here with this tool, but over here I'm going to catch it with this tool. But if I don't have a program and a roadmap with like the NIST framework or something to that effect, I'm not going to build that program and the practice that's going to allow me to catch the bad guys if I'm not thinking about it holistically, right? And then I think finally you have to have the people in on your side. Right? You have to
Mhm.
spend time with them, coaching them, teaching them, helping them understand that security. There was a slogan: "Security is not complete without you," and in the word security, the "you" was missing, right? And without you, without our customers, without our people, our program is going to fail.
Hmm. You say it starts with the leadership, with the people, with you. So are you saying businesses have to go out and hire a bunch of security experts? Like who sets that tone?
So I'd love to say the answer is yes. Um, but I can tell you there's a huge demand for security qualified people, and they don't exist. There's not many of them. But there's certainly not enough to fill the backlog um, in the open jobs. So I think there's a huge opportunity to build relationships with third parties who have environments and have infrastructure and have the people who are trained who can step in and be a complement to your internal team where you may only have one or two security people, but then you've got a whole team that's outsourced 7 by 24 monitoring, managing, responding to security events.
And is that kind of the trend now, David? Are more businesses outsourcing and finding a reputable managed security service provider?
I think they have to, right?
Mhm.
Because so let me back up. If they don't recognize they need security, then the answer is no. And those people are going to continue to get compromised and lose their data, right? But those who understand the business problem know that they can't find the people, right? They don't know what tools to use. They don't know how to staff it. Um, building a 7 by 24 security operations center is a significant investment.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yep.
they have to be prepared for that. And where they're not, you're seeing a lot of people flocking to those reputable third party managed security companies.
So, David, it seems like you are really encouraging business leaders to find a managed security service provider. So, where can our listeners get information?
Great question. So I think they start with the partnerships they have, right? They're going to have probably some outsourced IT company that's helping them. Um, there are consortiums of managed security companies out there where they can go to CompTIA and some of the other organizations and look for partners that would fit in their culture, right? Um, and then I think the other thing to do is go ask their friends, right? To talk to their colleagues and say, who are you using? The thing that I would always caution folks on is don't assume that because someone's at the top quadrant or on the top of the list that they're going to meet the cultural requirements that you have for your partner, right? Do some digging, ask the hard questions. Just because you're number 10 in the top 250 list doesn't mean you're good at responding, right? You may have a lot of revenue that's driving your number up there, but you're really not great at responding to a denial of service. So I think as our listeners are looking for those partners, ask the hard questions, right? What do you do? Where's your staff located? Are you US based? Are you using open source tools? Do they have a methodology around notification? Is there automation? There's a lot of questions that I think you have to ask, but starting with your trusted partners, hitting some of the trade websites around managed security, ask the right questions, and then ultimately, do the trial, right? Do a POC. Let them prove that they can work in your environment and deliver some results.
All very good answers, David. Thank you. And I think all of our listeners definitely learned that cybersecurity is not a product, it's a practice, it's a process, and it's the people. And one of the best recommendations, David, that you gave us today is to find a managed security partner who you trust. What is a SOC, right? And why do I need one? Because most businesses or their IT guy has installed security hardware or software on their network to stop viruses and hackers. So most people assume they're protected from security threats, but that's not the case.
Yeah, it's far from the truth. The truth is, the bad guys don't sleep, right? They are constantly poking and prodding our networks, looking for a vantage point. Um, we have to some extent put our head in the sand in that we think, to your point, we've got enough. We've done enough. We've got firewalls. Our folks use VPN. Oh, that's all we need, right? And the truth is, if you listen to our first podcast, you know that defense in depth has to be taken into account. And having the best tools, generating the best logs in the world when nobody's looking at them, just is just noise, right? There's a joke in the industry, and it's a picture of four beds, and you've got the CEO asleep in bed, and you've got the CFO asleep in bed, and the COO's asleep in bed, and then the CISO's bed's empty, right? Because the CISO is focused on protecting when everyone else is in bed.
He's not sleeping.
He's not sleeping. He or she is without hair, right? They're getting old. They've got gray and all that other fun stuff. Um,
David, that means you're not sleeping.
well, we are because we have a managed SOC, right? And this is where I think we're going today. Is um, I can have the best tools in the world. I can give you stories of Fortune 50 companies that had log data that nobody saw, right? And then they got breached and they ended up on the front of the newspaper. And why do I need a SOC? Well, I may have the best tools, but if nobody sees that one event that goes by, right, amongst the thousand of events that are happening in an environment, you're going to fail. You're more than likely going to get a breach, right?
Mhm.
And so managed SOC is an opportunity to have folks looking at critical events, critical anomalies in your environment, and then not just looking at them and sending off an email, right? I once had a managed service partner of mine, and we were experiencing a denial of service, and they did nothing. And then 3 days later, when they called me to ask me for the renewal, I said, "Well, did you guys see that denial of service?" And they said, "No." Well, I'm not renewing.
Hmm.
because basically their mode was, if I see something, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you via an email. But what we're really talking about is a managed service where not only are we watching, but we're responding. And a good managed SOC does both of those things.
So a SOC, a security operations center, is much like a central command post, which includes people.
It very much is. In fact,
Hmm.
if you were to walk into some of the larger MSSPs, it would look like a war room, right? You walk in and you've got monitors and all kinds of data, and it looks like you've got traffic moving here and traffic moving there, and you've got analysts who are watching, and then you've got somebody in the command post, if you will, directing. I need you to do this and you to do this and you to focus on that. And that execution of that teamwork brings the service to the full power of the tool sets, right? Because if you've got the tool sets that can respond, but nobody to tell them to respond, they're worthless. I mean,
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, they do have some value. But again, it's a function of, I've invested in these tools. I need to know if they're working. And if they're working, and if they're not working, I need somebody who can take action off of those.
That kind of leads to my next question. So you're saying it's like a war room, it's really active. So are there really that many bad guys trying to disrupt networks that you would see, analysts looking at many monitors and seeing activity?
If I could give you a glimpse into a day in the life of a CISO or the day in the life of a SOC manager, you would see millions of events. I had an opportunity a couple years ago to sit down with the CISO from a very large video content provider in South America, right? 35, 40 million subscribers. And they were getting 20 to 30 million events a day, right? And that's a day of traffic. And
That's
so the
incredible.
challenge, it is incredible. The challenge is, and he asked me that question, he says, how do I figure out what's important? Right? The human mind, we can juggle and manage a lot of things, but we can't scale. And so the only way to do that is have tool sets that can run machine learning and AI and do some cool stuff, but they still kick out output that you and I have to look at and potentially take action on. So the other anecdotal story I'll tell you is I was in Beijing, um, and you can decide if you want to keep this piece in here or not, Susanna. But I'm going to tell a story.
Oh,
Um,
we love stories.
so I'm in Beijing, and I'm with one of my colleagues who lives there, and we're driving, and he pointed out this very large building, and he says, "You know what that is?" And I said, "No, I don't live here. How would I know what that is?" And it turns out it's a facility where the Chinese government houses all of their nation state hackers, the guys that are on the payroll, right, as part of the Chinese army. And they're paid to go hack and steal from us, right? Their only job, they get out of bed in this facility and they walk to a command center, if you will, and they hack against us and against other people who are building intellectual property, and they're taking it from us. It is a war, right?
Hmm.
It's a war of the good guys who are protecting versus the bad guys who want to steal. So it is a war room. It is us versus them all day, every day.
So, what kind of specialized degrees or expertise do these analysts need in order to be productive and fight in this kind of battle, this cyber war, if you
Yeah,
will?
that's a great question. Throughout my career, I'll tell you, I've hired accountants who have become phenomenal analysts or architects or engineers. I've hired music majors who've turned into be these phenomenal security people because they tend to see things bigger picture. Accountants, music majors. Um, at the end of the day, you have to have an aptitude, and you have to have the right attitude, and you have to enjoy the details. Right? It's the details that will cost us someone getting compromised. Um, and having an affinity towards the spy, the good guy versus the bad guy, the cops versus a robber is always fun, right? So it makes the job more interesting. But specifically to your question, um, having a strong knowledge of networking is key, I think. Right. So if you were to say, what does the best analyst look like? They don't have to come to the table with Palo Alto or Checkpoint or firewall experience. They have to know networking. They have to understand it. I don't need them to be coders, but I need them to be able to parse through data,
Mhm.
right? Um, I don't need them to be database architects, but I need them to understand the implications of SQL tables and what if somebody's pulling all of the data, and they have to have that interest in understanding why, right? Why am I seeing more traffic to this place today than I did yesterday, right? Why is it a different type of traffic, or why is it running a different application, or um, why is that machine in this country that has a bad reputation trying to come into my network or my customer's network, right? So you have to have and enjoy the why.
Mhm.
But ultimately, a SIM is taking a lot of data sources and putting some intelligence on it to identify. I've got these 10 lanes of traffic, but this one car has a bomb in it, right? Does that make sense?
I think so. So why is that tool, I guess, important for an analyst to be able to
Well, because
use?
in any organization, you've got data that's coming from your firewalls, from your servers, from your applications, and they're all feeding this data lake or this data environment, if you will. Um, and so being able to have all this data, think about a 10-lane highway in LA. There's one car amongst thousands that you have to find, right? The sim's going to help you figure out which car is the important car, but
Mhm.
understand you've got trucks data and you've got car data and semis and lots of data sources that are all coming together, and there's one in there that you have to find, you have to know about, and that's where the sim comes into play.
And so it helps to reduce the amount of analysis and response that's handled by an analyst as
I think
well.
it has to, right? if
Mhm.
if it's not doing its job, right? Because at the end of the day, a good analyst or a good MSSP is going to give you two stats, right? Two stats that we focus on. Mean time to detection, which means I found that car really quickly, right? And then mean time to response is I sent a missile and I blew the car up, right? Because it's a bad car. Um, so the shorter I can reduce both of those numbers, the more safe and secure my customers are.
The SOC team definitely has an important job in responding to threats, you would say.
Absolutely. I think I think they have the first line of defense, and then the second is working with the subject matter experts within those environments, right? So if I see that car over there that looks funny, I may call someone who lives in that state, and they go, "Well, really, that's just our off road car that we take to go find dead wildlife, right, or some other purpose, right?" So that the analyst won't know everything about your network. They won't know all what all the normal cars look like, and that's where they're going to do all their due diligence to find the bad car. But then they're going to work with our partner, our customer, to say, does this look normal to you, right? And that's where that customer behavior or customer response comes into play.
So stock obviously is a good idea, but it seems like a heavy lift for most companies. And I know, you've been kind of sprinkling in the idea of a managed stock. Tell me a little bit more about the difference.
So standing up your own SOC, a lot of companies do it, and it's typically your mid-market enterprise size companies because they can afford it, they can find the right people. But if you think about a smaller company, mid-market SMB, 7 by 24 means you need about 11 full-time security employees, and that's just coverage. That doesn't account for weekends and holidays and babies being born and people being sick. But there's 11 people, and if you think about it, probably half of them are around 60K and the other half are over 100. So you're talking a half a million just in labor, right? You got to have the facilities to manage that. So you need dedicated facilities. There's probably 1.5 million in upfront investment costs just to have the facility right. And then you got the tools, right? So the SIM tool, the SOAR tools, the IDS tools, all those tools that we're managing on behalf of the customer. So you've got a $2 to $3 million investment to just to stand up your own MSSP or your own SOC, your own SOC as a service. Um, but then you got to learn how to run it, right? So now you've got all of that delay, and I got to learn the tools. I got to learn what they look like, how to respond, how to ticket, what are my SLAs, and all of those other things that need to come into play. So yes, it can be done, but it's very cost prohibitive.
Now, do all MSSPs or security service providers offer SOC services?
No, a large portion of them are focused on the consulting side.
Mhm.
So they'll come in and say, "Yeah, this is great. Just do this, um, or buy this tool, or put these controls in place." They don't offer a SOC as a service, but then there's some that do everything. So if you're looking for one, just do your due diligence, and you'll find them.
And where can our listeners find a good managed security service provider with a SOC?
So I think there's a couple. There's a lot of sources really,
Mhm.
but a couple that I would look at is there are services like Gartner and some of the other organizations out there that rate them. Right, so go look at the top 250 in the world and see one that meets what you need. Um, there are trade groups, right? There's the local ISACA events you can go to and say, "Hey, who are you guys using to manage
Mhm.
your risk?" Um, and then ask the people you trust, right? You certainly have colleagues at other companies that are doing some of the same things that you are, have the same challenges. Go talk to them, right? Go hit your network up.
Does Overwatch offer SOC services?
Yeah. So Overwatch, we are 7 by 24 managed security operations center. And we will monitor, manage, and respond to threats in your network any time of the day.